Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mad Scientist Brewing Beer Education Series. In this video, I'm going to be talking a bit more about malt, and specifically the different kinds of malt that are available to brewers. So there are a few different classifications of malt. The first is base malt. This is the least kilned malt and has all of its enzymes still intact for converting starches into fermentable sugars. You can use base malts for up to 100% of the grain recipe. Another kind is specialty malts, which are treated to additional kilning and roasting in order to build flavor and color in the malt. These malts have had most or all of their enzymes degraded and need to be mashed with some portion of base malt. Another kind are adjunct malts. These are non-barley malts, including wheat, oats, rye, and corn, and a few others. These adjuncts are used with a large portion of base malt in most recipes. All right, so breaking them down into each group, for the base malts, the first of these is the Pilsner malt. This is the palest malt at 1.5 to 2.5 degrees Lovibond. It has a very light, grainy cereal flavor and is used for making pale lagers and many European beer styles. The next is pale malt, which is slightly darker, but still a pale malt at around 2 to 3 degrees Lovibond. This malt is typically used for making ales and is the most commonly used base malt. The next is Vienna malt, which is a German base malt at about 4 degrees Lovibond that adds malty and lightly biscuit flavors. It is used to make amber beer styles like Vienna lager or to add malt depth to other styles. And then there's Munich malt, which is another German base malt that is similar to Vienna but is kilned further to 7 to 10 degrees Lovibond, giving it a deeper malt and bready flavor. Some versions are even darker and can be up to 20 degrees Lovibond, but these can't be used for the entirety of the recipe. It is used to make deep amber beers such as Märzen and Oktoberfest. For the specialty malts, amongst these you have first the kilned malts. These are ones which have just been kilned a bit further than the base malt. The first of these is aromatic malt, which is around 20 degrees Lovibond and provides intense malty flavor. Next is melanoidin malt, which is around 20 to 35 degrees Lovibond and provides honey and biscuit flavor, as well as bringing out colors that mimic a long boil. The next is biscuit malt, which is around 20 degrees Lovibond and provides warm and toasty flavors. Victory malt is around 30 degrees Lovibond and provides toasty, nutty, and biscuit flavors, along with an amber color. Moving up to some darker kiln malts, you have brown malt. This is around 60 to 70 degrees Lovibond and is not often seen that much anymore, having been replaced usually with a combination of base malt and light use of roasted malt in most recipes instead. It provides a dark color and dark roasted flavor, usually seen in British beer styles. Then there is pale chocolate malt. It's about as dark as a malt can be using the kiln method without being roasted, and is around 200 to 250 degrees Lovibond. It lends a dark color and light roasty chocolate flavor. Amongst the kiln malts, you also have smoked malts. These are base malts that have had added smoke from various wood sources when they're being kilned. Used sparingly, these malts provide a hint to a strong smoke flavor that is expected for some styles like Rauch beer. You can also have acidulated malts. These are base malts which have been treated with lactic acid or lactic-producing bacteria so that they can reduce the pH of the mash when it's added to the mash. These malts are useful if a brewer doesn't want to use an acid to hit a target mash pH, or where it would otherwise not be allowed, as when brewing in Germany. The next class of specialty malts are stewed malts, which are primarily the caramel and crystal malts. These are made by kilning malt at a very moist environment to convert starches within the individual malt kernels and develop a range of flavors during the duration that depend on the duration of the kilning. So these produce a very broad range of sweet flavors, the lighter ones giving beer a sweet, almost caramel-like flavor that progresses towards toffee, a deeper caramel, burnt sugar, toasted marshmallow, and eventually dried fruits like raisin or plum. These can range anywhere from 10 to 120 degrees Lovibond. There's also dextrin malts. This is a special kind of malt which has been stewed to convert the starches, but is otherwise low in color and does not contribute color or flavor to beer. Instead, it is used to promote the body and head retention, since it can only provide unfermentable sugars and proteins to beer. Lastly, there are the roasted specialty malts. The first being chocolate malt. This is a dark roasted malt, typically around 350 degrees Lovibond, that provides bittersweet chocolate and coffee flavor to beer. Next is black malt. This is the darkest malt at 500 degrees Lovibond or more, and adds a lot of roasty, burnt, ashy flavor that gives beer a dry character. Typically, this is just a small portion of the recipe because otherwise the beer would be unpleasant to drink. Another kind of roasted malt is debittered malt, which is a roasted malt that's had its barley husk removed, thus getting rid of a lot of the astringency and harshness that comes from having roasted malt. These malts are used when crafting a black beer that would have a smooth roast flavor, such as Schwarzbier and black IPA. So this largely covers the different varieties of malt that are available to the brewer, and I will leave the video at that. So until next time, cheers.